welcome to Community Church Unitarian Universalist, our slightly different virtual service. So it is wonderful to see you in all the ways that we can right now. I see your names on Facebook. I get to talk with many of you through the week, and also we Zoom. Some of you may be really sick of Zoom or not know what Zoom is, but it may become our friend in the next few months even more. But first, let me tell you about Community Church Unitarian Universalist. We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. So a few pieces today for announcements. Please know that directly after this service, we will have our Time for All Ages with our amazing religious education director, Cynthia Ramirez. She does a longer story as well as a craft that you all can do throughout the week. So we thank Cynthia so much for doing this. Also today, we are trying something new and we hope to make this a weekly occurrence. We're going to try our first virtual coffee hour hosted by our wonderful CCUU president, Dion DeVille. So it will be on Zoom. You should have, as a member and attender, received a text and in your Community Matters newsletter this week, a link to Zoom. And that will allow you all to come into this virtual Zoom coffee hour space, and you'll be divided up into rooms, and you'll be able to get to actually see and talk to so many members of your faith community. We hope that continues to help us sustain our relationships, communication in this time. So with that, let us also begin our worship together.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit, draw near.
So as we do each week in our Community Church UU service, we will be lighting our chalice. And I am asking, I know it's a familiar CCUU youth face, and in these times, this will be the face of our chalice lighting for the next coming weeks. Today he is in his pajamas, which some of you may be, which, you know what? That is fine for church. It would be fine on another Sunday as well. So, Sebastian, come on up here.
I'm a superhero.
And come light our chalice, please. And you will hear the wonderful Bennett Britt, who has been helping us through this time, his voice, as we have the words for our chalice lighting. For more singing, please join us. Rise, recline, stay seated as you are willing and able for hymn 215, Praise to the Living God.
And is to be forever the same. declare God's loveliness. No holiness on earth can ever name express, whose love enfolds us all, whose love the earth displays. Yea, everywhere, above, below, His perfect grace. The Spirit floweth free, high surging where it will. In prophets' word did speak of old, and speaketh still. The Torah rests secure, and changeless it shall stand. Deep writ upon the human heart, on sea and land. Eternal life hath God implanted in the soul. Such love shall be our strength and stay while ages roll. Praise to the living God, all praised be the name, which was and is to be forever the same.
All right, all. Now is the time for a particularly important part of our service that to do virtually can sometimes be more difficult, but actually is also more poignant because it is the way that we connect at this time. One of the ways we do this is through our joys and our sorrows. So we're going to lift up all the joys that we've had this week. And yes, we know they are contained within a smaller physical space, but they may be joys all the same. And we also hold the sorrows, both personal, communal, and global, that so many of us are experiencing at this moment in time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to play a song, another beautiful song by Bennett Britt. And in this time, we ask that you write in, as you feel comfortable sharing on Facebook, your joys and your sorrows. After our song is done, I will be able to then say them aloud and light our candle next to our chalice that is bringing a little bit of our community church Unitarian Universalist to my living room and to all of you here today. So please, as you are willing and able, share your joys and sorrows, and we will read them aloud after our song. All right, lifting up our joys and sorrows today, Erfan says, joyful and thankful for all the essential workers. And that is in parentheses. I think I know what you mean there. Thanks to all the people who are putting themselves out there to help all of us with our medical needs, with our food needs, and with all that we need in this time. Marilyn Malone lifts up that her niece Hannah is getting married today, and they're going to watch the ceremony on Facebook. So these are a lot of firsts for a lot of people. So we celebrate that, Marilyn. Dion DeVille says prayers up for Patricia Madere Dempster, matriarch of Dion's friends family, who passed away last night from complications of COVID-19. That is a deep sorrow indeed. Will Bowling writes, my wife Aubrey and I are celebrating our 1-year anniversary tomorrow. What a wonderful joy. Congratulations. There is gratitude that Cynthia Ramirez, his sister, is taking care of her mother. Sean O'Brien, a wonderful individual out in the larger community, is thankful for friends looking out for each other and staying connected for however they can. Jolie Bonk is joyful that she can make masks while listening to this service. Thank you, Jolie. Tanya Papello Tanya Lote has so many sorrows for the world right now, and she's also thankful for the small things. Karen Gibb Connor misses her friend's journey. Sabrina Pimley is a little sad that she hasn't been able to see her friends and families and won't be able to see them anytime soon. We share in that sorrow. And Liz Trotter is thankful for the love and support of this community. You are truly my family and my rock. And so in this time, I light 2 more candles. One for all the joys that may be bubbling up in the future. There will be joys to come, and the joys that we are appreciating here and now. And another candle for all the sorrows that so many of us are holding in this time. Sometimes with each other, and sometimes in solitude. Let us have a moment of silence for all the joys and all our sorrows. We will now be moving into hymn 299, Make Channels for the Streams of Love.
Make channels for the streams of love, where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them every one. But if at any time we cease such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
Our first reading today is by May Sarton, The Work of Happiness. I thought of happiness, how it is woven out of the silence in the empty house each day, and how it is not sudden and it is not given, but is creation itself, like the growth of a tree. No one has seen it happen, but inside the bark, another circle is growing in the expanding ring. No one has heard the root go deeper in the dark, but the tree is lifted by the inward work, and its plumes shine, and its leaves are glittering. So happiness is woven out of the peace of hours, and strikes its roots deep in the house alone. The old chest in the corner, cool wax floors, white curtains softly and continually blown as the free air moves quietly about the room. A shelf of books, a table, and the whitewashed wall. These are the dear, familiar gods of home, and here the work of faith can best be done. The growing tree is green and musical. For what is happiness but growth in peace? The timeless sense of time when furniture has stood a lifespan in a single place. And as the air moves, so the old dreams stir, the shining leaves of present happiness. No one has heard, thought, or listened to a mind, but where people have lived in inwardness. The air is charged with blessing and does bless. Windows look out on mountains, and the walls are kind. So Community Church Unitarian Universalist, we are a self-sustaining congregation. Members and friends' generosity help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond, especially in this time. So thank you for all that you're doing, whether it is sewing masks while watching this service, reaching out to our sanctuary partners, reaching out to each other. That means something in this time. That means everything in this time. We also thank you for your continued financial support so that we as a community continue to try to do the work of faith and love and compassion. So you can give online at ccuunola.org. Check our website out. You can give by text right now at 504-370-2659. Pretty soon we'll be able to see that information in our chat box, and you're going to text GIVE to be prompted to make your donation. Or you can send us a check at our church address on the website, ccuunola.org. We thank you for all that you do every day. We thank you for all the gifts that you bring to our community. Our second and third readings today, first from the Bible, Luke 22:39 through 46. Jesus prays on the Mount of Olives. He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into your time of trial." Then he withdrew from them. About a stone's throw away, knelt down, and he prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. Our second reading today is misattributed, but still cited widely from John Murray. "Go out into the highways and byways of America, your new country. You may possess only a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Do not push them deeper into their theological despair, but preach the kindness and everlasting love of God." All right, so as I just read, our Universalist ancestor John Murray famously proclaimed, though it's probably not true, to give them hope, not hell. And generally, I agree. But today, I want us Unitarian Universalists to dwell a bit on hell. I know most of us don't believe in it. So let's look at it the way that French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre framed it. Hell is other people. Because at this moment in time, while a non-human pandemic is racing across our world, a very human element of arrogance and cruelty is leading the U.S. federal response to this pandemic, leading to more lives lost, more lives upturned each day. Hell can also feel a bit like despair, too. So as we Unitarian Universalists with Christian roots enter into the Christian Holy Week, following Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, his betrayal, execution, and resurrection, we could learn a thing or two about sitting with despair from this story. Not as some exercise in self-flagellation or a plan or a map, which none of us will have at this point for the next few months, but as a way of being, recognizing our hell, our despair when needed, in order to move into how we might find and bring others hope. May Sarton's poem on happiness that we read today moved me particularly because it was hard-earned happiness. Sarton's life was filled with intermittent periods of hope and despair. She grappled with depression throughout her life, and her journals tell of a woman who, instead of denying her state, allowed it to be as long as it needed to be. And particularly, Sarton embraced solitude, those moments when she had only herself to reckon with in her despair. Now, at this moment in time, some of you may physically be in solitude, the only one at your home, save perhaps for a beloved pet. Some of us may be surrounded by family all the time. But even with that physical closeness, I think everyone has a bit of solitude, mentally and spiritually, in this moment. We are each grappling with our isolation, anxiety, and uncertainty in different ways. My husband will often check in with me after we've put our son to bed, when I seem to be in that dazed 9 p.m. state that many parents of young kids might recognize. My answers to him are often monosyllabic. I feel very boring indeed. But in this inelegant and inarticulate state, there is more than simply exhaustion. I am in my solitude, in a place where my beloved husband can't even reach. Mainly these days, it is about cradling my 9-month pregnant belly and wondering where that journey will take me. Returning to a hospital where I lost one pregnancy already during a pandemic. Reckoning with my actual embodied fear that cannot be fully reached by others, no matter how much they love or sympathize with me. Often this contemplation is hard, scary. My mind wanders to the most frightening of places. And yet, when I have contemplated for a time, and when I am be able to pull myself out of that solitude, I do feel more. I see more clearly. I am at the full apex of my humanness. As Sarton writes, the value of solitude, one of its values, is of course that there is nothing to cushion against attacks from within, just as there is nothing to help balance at times of particular stress or depression. A few moments of conversation may calm an inner storm. But the storm, painful as it is, might have had some truth in it. So sometimes one has to simply endure a period of depression for what it may hold of illumination, if one can live through it, attentive to what it exposes or demands. While this despair of mine is not clinical depression, and also to note that with clinical depression, medication is also something that helps people move through it as well, it is despair all the same. And in this time, in this place, bouts of despair may actually be the only rational reaction. So I wonder for you, what have you lost even in this short amount of time? What have you despaired? From the smallest of things, a wedding postponed, a vacation canceled, freedom to roam as you would like, to the largest, the death of a loved one, loss of job and stability, hope for a desired near future. All of these losses matter. It is not selfish to mourn the losses in your own small world as well as the world's larger tragedies. Because only in despairing and mourning can you start to connect to one iota of the pain that others, particularly folks without resources or steady health in this time, are feeling. What many folks beyond the privileged bubble that many of us live in feel most of the time. Uncertainty, insecurity, anxiety, fear. It is in this recognition of likeness, even in the smallest of ways, that we may begin to feel not only empathy, but a shared understanding of the way the world could look like for all of us in this together. So that we might not, when the worst of this crisis is over, turn from the memory of our despair back to the false comfort of our capitalist world. The gleaming beauty of a Whole Foods that promises redemption with a $40 piece of salmon. A Black Friday sale after Thanksgiving that entices us all with electronics we need to keep us numb. A political system that, with the rise of the stock market, will one day declare an end to our economic woes and a return to business as usual. Lack of health care for the vast majority of our country, corporate tax incentives, and blaming of the poor for having the audacity to exist. Many of whom, by the way, we deem essential, but still refuse to pay a living wage of $15 an hour. But I'm jumping to hope, or at least some action already. I know that's very Unitarian Universalist of me. So let's dwell a bit more in despair. Though today in the Christian liturgical calendar is Palm Sunday, where Jesus enters Jerusalem in triumph, palm fronds blanketing his entry, this next week pulls more into despair as Jesus comes closer and closer to his execution by the state. One of the hardest and most poignant moments in the biblical text, in my mind, is our reading today. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, at the foot of the Mount of Olives, alone, frightened, despairing. So Jesus can't sleep, and he's on the run from the law, knowing what is to come, his torture and his death. He walks out to this beautiful garden alone, a garden that's actually still intact in Jerusalem today. He begs God, his Father, to take this responsibility away, begs not to die. Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. And when an angel comes to give him strength, in his anguish he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat becomes like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. The strongest thing that Jesus can do in that moment, even given the strength of a supernatural entity, an angel, is to still mourn. Last week we spoke of the very humanness of those we deem martyrs. That the more we recognize their humanness, the more we might grieve their loss, the more we might recognize ourselves in them as well. This, in my mind, is Jesus at his most raw and human, in solitude, despairing. By next Sunday, in the Christian tradition, there will be a tale of triumph and resurrection in the Easter story. Easter will look different for us Unitarian Universalists, who don't generally believe in Jesus' resurrection from the dead. But hope will be found all the same. For now, though, it is in solitude and despair that we recognize Jesus. And without saying we're Jesus, I'm not going that far in my blasphemy today. I'm wondering the strength we too show in our despairing, in our mourning. It may come as little surprise that my initial reaction to this crisis is to be a doer, to be of service. This has worked its way into my ministry in several ways. Pastorally, trying to connect us all through different streams of communication, making sure worship occurs each week as part of our shared worship, supporting the larger community with advocacy. But I haven't been as good at practicing what I preach in other areas, not being a perfectionist and truly being present in the moment. Until this last weekend, I finally cried, 3 times in fact. Now, y'all are going to start thinking I'm a Trinitarian with my Holy Week talk and Trinity of Darcy's tears, but here goes. First was the mundane despair cry. On Friday night, I cried after having a small, but it meant something so much larger, fight with my beloved older sister on the phone. Our general anxiety ratcheting up to profound miscommunication. Second was the personal despair cry. On a Saturday call to my parents, recognizing for the first time that they will most likely not be able to come help us in the first few weeks with a newborn, that my husband may not be able to be in the delivery room, that my health and the health of my future child will be more at risk. Finally came the personal and communal cry on Sunday, at the memorial service of the amazing Reverend William Barnwell, a dear colleague, and an amazing progressive minister in New Orleans. This was no ordinary memorial service, of course. Mourners were asked to line up and stay in their cars. Then we processed down a street in Uptown, over 100 cars with blinking lights, some with flags of gratitude waving from their windows. We processed to Reverend Barnwell's home, where his beloved widow Corinne, a fierce advocate herself for progressive causes, stood outside as we each, car by car, paid our socially distanced respect. There was mourning there and despair. There was hope, too, that even in this socially distanced time, particularly for such a social city as New Orleans, we still find ways to be connected, to mourn, to show each other love, to despair, and to find hope. I think it's important to note in these times, especially for those of us who are mourning the death of someone, whether COVID-related or not, where traditional funerals and second lines are not possible, that Jesus was not able to be buried immediately after his death, that it was Sabbath the day after his death, so the full preparation of his body and public grieving was postponed. The next day, that Easter Sunday, we know what happens from a biblical perspective. The stone rolled away, Jesus' body disappeared, Jesus' reappearance to the women and disciples before his ascent into heaven. But let us all remember that Saturday, that Sabbath, and think of this time in history as that period of waiting, where many of us will continue to find ways to be together, to grieve and celebrate too, in creative and sustaining ways, until we are together again. And let us not forget that the solitude of this time can lead us into moments of despair, as well as deep and engaged thinking, where we do not deny our realities, but embrace them in all their hard, beautiful complexity. Author Ben Marcus of The Flame Alphabet, a novel that revels in despair, notes when speaking of his own creative work, "I get a lot of joy and pleasure out of the bleakest things. I guess I feel there's something more honest to it, if it's done well. And that honesty of it is a great relief. To encounter a really honest take on what it's like to be in a family or to be someone who is going to die feels joyous, as opposed to reading something that would really like to suggest that this stuff doesn't exist, that there isn't pain or tremendous tension, misunderstanding." So to me, being present to our despair might be likened to opening the emotional spigot of our lives, letting a little bit of water flow freely. Because if we don't, if we deny our despair or loss in the name of just moving forward, then one day that water will flow, that dam will break, and we may be overwhelmed, as if we aren't a little bit already. Since this last weekend where I first cried 3 times, my tears have flowed more freely. Once at a Disney movie, God help me. Once in reading a poem I was preparing for worship. Another time in a moment of solitude in my own small garden out back. And I'm able to continue to do my ministry, to have my doctor's appointments, to homeschool my son part of the day, to have the check-in phone calls, continue with the organizing, the connection to help the larger community, the occasional bout of sleep. I wish that for you as well. Now, while dwelling in despair has made me a bit more melancholy, absorbing some loss now, and the loss that may come from my own small world, as well as the larger world that surrounds me, it's also made me a little more human, and appreciative too. I put down my computer at the end of the day and appreciate time spent with my 3-person family, while looking forward to the addition of a 4th. Appreciate our neighborhood nature walks, including the odd and wonderful self-expression of our neighbors, from a fake koala in a tree to a hand-painted "No Place for Hate" sign on a fence. I appreciate the voices and faces, even on Zoom, of our beloved CCU members who are getting by. I'm not sure I'm at hope and happiness at this point. I'm not sure a great many of us are. But we are on the road to a more authentic humanness. And perhaps that's the next step toward the happiness that May Sarton, who pulled herself through mental health challenges throughout her life, describes. I thought of happiness, how it is woven out of the silence in the empty house each day, and how it is not sudden and it is not given, but is creation itself, like the growth of a tree. Our happiness and hope as Unitarian Universalists will not be sudden and will not be given at this time, but we will find it intermittently, imperfectly, authentically. At the end of our journey, like Jesus in his triumph, despair, and resurrection during Holy Week, we will come out changed. So may we begin to lay the foundation for our change today, not running away from our solitude and despair, but embracing it. Recognizing that hope and hell, or despair, are not necessarily opposites, but are linked. Because it is only in recognizing the despair and pain in this moment that we can ever, with clear vision, begin to reimagine a world in where all people have the opportunity for an authentic, hopeful happiness. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
Our benediction today is from Pat Schneider. And please see the angel for you humanists you use out there or others, naturalists, anything on this lines. Please see the angel as you see fit. Is there an angel in the house? Is there an angel in the house? If there is, come to me. And if you aren't too tired or otherwise occupied, and if it isn't too tacky a request, please rock me. I am bruised. If you will hold me until morning, I promise I will rise and light the fire and break the bed and put back on my shoulder my corner of the world. But for now, I could use the shelter of a wing. Excuse me. Excuse me. Is there an angel in the house? Go in peace. You are loved. And together, we will see each other in person one day. Until then, may you be blessed in your solitude, in your community, in your hope, in your pain, and in all that makes you the incredible human that you are.
Good morning, everybody. What a what a lovely service that was. It was a little touching. Kind of got me a little weepy. I'm sure a lot of y'all had that also. Um, well, this morning we're going to be talking about. I know this is a very hard, trying time, and I always try to find, what is good happening now. I mean, we see it all around us. Just everybody just, I saw it in Katrina. Just the common people just rising up, and being of service. And this is how you control the situation that you're in. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about gratitude, and this story is called "The Three Wishes." A poor woodcutter set out one fine morning to cut firewood to sell at the market. "Wish me luck, dear wife," he said, "that I might find some fallen tree in the king's forest. Only the fallen wood is free to poor peasants like ourselves." As he marched into the forest with his sharp axe over his shoulder, he eyed the trees right and left. All were upright and healthy. Others had come before and scored the ground of branches. "I'll get some wood by hook or by crook," he muttered. Finally he stopped in front of a great oak tree. Leafy branches crowded its huge trunk. "Now here is a tree worth its weight in gold," exclaimed the woodcutter. I will make a fortune cutting it down for the market." As he swung his axe high over his shoulder, a tree fairy appeared before him and said, "Stop! Spare this tree, for this has lived longer than you. Respect your elders." "But this tree is worth great amount of money," protested the woodcutter. "I'm tired of laboring so hard, traveling to find broken branches to sell. This is good, hard work, and I mean to make the use of it." The fairy threw up her hands and around the tree and said, if I give me your word that you will not cut down this ancient tree, I will grant you 3 wishes." The woodcutter put down the axe and considered the proposal. 3 wishes? He mused, thinking about vast wealth. "If you promise that you will never cut down an old tree, the 3 wishes will be yours," said the fairy. "Very well," said the woodcutter. "A promise is a promise. I agree never to cut down an old tree. Besides, I will have no further need to cut wood. I will wish for wealth enough to retire." In a blinking, the woodcutter axe disappeared, and the fairy vanished. By these signs, the woodcutter knew that the fairy would grant his wishes. He ran home to tell his good wife. Red-faced and panting, he burst through the door. "Wife, wife," he cried, "we are rich beyond our wildest dreams." The wife blinked in disbelief. "How is it that you left this morning, despairing our poverty, and you return tonight exclaiming our wealth?" I spared a tree in the king's forest," the woodcutter explained, "and the tree fairy said she would grant me 3 wishes for my kindness." "Then think carefully," said the good wife with glee. "Well then," said the woodcutter, "I might wish for a fine house with a garden." "Fool," said the wife, "think bigger. Wish for a palace." "What good is a palace without gold enough to maintain it with servants, and cooks, and stable boys?" said the woodcutter. "I must wish for a bag of gold." "You are not thinking big enough, husband. Why wish for a bag of gold when you can have a cart full of it?" "And a fine horse to pull the cart," said the woodcutter explained. "Don't waste your wishes," cried the woman. "You could have a herd of horses." "All this thinking," said the woodcutter, is making me very hungry. I wish I had some sausages." In the blink of an eye, a huge chain of sausages fell into the middle of the room. "Oh, no," screeched the wife. "You've wasted a wish. What a fool you are. You could have anything, and you think about your stomach." Unable to stand the tirade of his wife, the woodcutter said, "Oh, I wish those sausages were stuck to your nose." In as little as it takes to tell it, the sausages stuck fast to the wife's nose. Horrified, the couple tried to pull them off. The harder they pulled, the tighter they stuck. The wife fell to the floor, sobbing so miserably that her husband says, "Well, I suppose there's nothing to do but to wish the sausages were off." In a blink, the sausages were on the table, on a plate. The woodcutter and his wife could do nothing but laugh at their own folly. "Nothing good ever comes from arguing," they agreed. "At least we have a fine supper," said the woodcutter. And never a finer supper was shared. The end. Okay, so what did we learn in that? Be grateful for what you have, right? We all have different stages in life, and but just be grateful. Even today, in this time, this is horrible what we're going through. But think about you're with family. You have time to just contemplate and see and get your house cleaned, this type of thing. So I want you to think about things that you're grateful for, even in this time of uncertainty. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do a little craft here. Most of you will probably do this, but I think we need to do this week. So what we're going to do is I made a gratitude jar, and you can do, I love glass jars. I cannot throw them. I have tons of them. And I like the shape of this one because it's a square and a circle. So, so get any jar, it can be anything that you want. And I'm such a hoarder with craft stuff. These are like, ribbon, but it has sticky to it. So you can do anything. You can do glitter, you can do fabric around it, you can decorate it any way you want to. You can do whatever you have around, just decorate it any way you want to. And on here I have one, it says, "See the promise of each day." I kind of like that. So what I'm going to do is, so what you do with your gratitude jar, okay, is every day this week, I want you to think about something you're grateful for and put it on a piece of paper. I did something nice to match my dress. And you're going to write, but you can do regular paper or fancy paper. You can decorate your paper and just write what you are grateful for. I wrote, which I put on that thing there, "I am grateful for my sisters and brother that are taking care of my mother at this time because I'm unable to do it. So I'm worried. So I'm grateful for that." So I'll put this into my jar and I'm going to seal it. So every day I want you to put something you're grateful for, and it'll make you feel better. And also you can say, you know what? Things do happen, but there is good things going around us, even in this time. I saw Jolie making masks. That's beautiful. Anything that you can do. Go see an elderly person, or just contact them, call them, do something that makes another feel better about the situation. It also makes you feel better. So, so I'm gonna leave you with that, and make sure you do your gratitude. I'm sure you're gonna feel pretty good about this. So, it's Easter. And so coming up, and Mason has some prizes. Who says we're not going to be cracking our eggs on Sunday? We're going to see about that. So anyway, so have a good week, and just be creative and be helpful. And I will see you next week.